Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining myself and Stefan. Stefan is the owner of Bear Oaks Family Naturist Park and a dear friend of mine. And I'm Nikki, for anybody who hasn't met me before. I am a body acceptance mentor, which I'll get into a little bit later. But it looks like I'm in Garden of Eden here. um, and we're speaking about naturism, and Stefan was just telling me he's in full uniform over there. Right, Stefan? Yeah.
I am. I'm not going to prove it, but you'll have to take my word for it.
That's right. And
Not if you ever want this to be on YouTube.
that's absolutely, yeah. Yeah. And I mean, it's legal for women to be top free in is it just Ontario or Canada?
The precedent has been set in Ontario only, but it probably applies to all of Canada because the law that was the law wasn't struck down. The law that allowed the law that is a federal law, and the Supreme Court of Canada uh, quoted that they think it has relevance across the country.
Hmm. Okay, well, and that's the thing
Oh,
is, so it's legal, but not socially acceptable, so it would seem. And so here I am, with my with my little garden in front of me, just keep it cozy because we feel uncomfortable about having ladies' nipples out. Although, my thought on that is that we are all born, all of us, woo, giving somebody else. This is fun. Um, we're all born with nipples, and then there's a decision inside of the womb that women are going to be the ones who be the breast bearers and can feed children should they have them. Yet it's so it makes then that men have something on their body that is just for decoration. And you would think then that maybe for the men, it would be the sensational thing. That would be like because ours, have a practical use, that we would be the ones that are like free to walk around all the time without our tops off. And it'd be you guys who would be like all fancy about your nipples.
I wouldn't say they have zero purpose. I mean, they may not have a much of a biological purpose, but they're fairly sensitive, and I think most men would agree with that as well.
That's true. That's true. You're right.
And which is funny because it makes it the question, um, the argument why women cannot show their nipples and that men can is a sexual one, and yet the sensitivity means that for men they is also can be an erogenous zone.
This
So
is a good
therefore,
point.
that makes them sexual too, doesn't it?
I could. You're right. Absolutely. Absolutely. And so here we are today with this here, just in a sense, uh, catering to society in a sense. I had a few naturist people reach out to me today wondering what the attire was because they wanted to make sure that they didn't come inappropriately dressed. And it was funny because when I put this as a Facebook event, one of Gerald's friends had hit the interested button, and we're quite certain that he would be very, very shocked and uncomfortable with the situation. He doesn't know about the naturism and he's rather religious. And when I said to Gerald that this is my intention to be top free and to have something and, blocking my chest, he looked so aghast, like that was the craziest thing in the world to possibly do. And it was funny because like he knows that I teach online like nude yoga twice a week. This is different that it's actually covered. So we're just working with everybody today. And that's the thing that's kind of interesting is that question, like, what will other people think? Like we were wondering, like, what will that friend think? And then if I were to not have the plants in front of me and were to conduct this situation, this chat, what would people think? Is kind of I think a big
What
question that people.
what would happen to the children if they saw it?
Yeah.
That's a big one. There's children around. I always found that fascinating, because children actually don't care, or find it funny or amusing or whatever. And my question has always been, um, what happens to children when they see women's nipples? And nobody can answer that question because, of course, there is no actual issue. But yeah, you're right. It's a social control. It's a social standard that people seem to all agree on. Whether it makes sense or not is quite debatable, but it's not a legal one anymore. Except it's also a community standards, which is part of the reason to do this way is if you were showing your nipples, mine are perfectly okay, but yours are not. Yours are scary and offensive. And that could even cause you trouble with your Zoom account. And it certainly would be a problem if you wanted to put it on YouTube or Facebook. So fascinating, isn't it? I mean, it's been over 30 years since women have had the right to be top free in Ontario. Do you see many?
Not
Why
at
is
all.
that?
Yeah. And I'm hoping actually, I have a Facebook group that Body Acceptance Warriors, and at the moment it's a women's only thing. And I'd like to do a trip, organize a trip for whoever's interested to go to Bear Oaks for people who, first timers and that kind of thing. And I have some people who are interested, and which is awesome. And I think that is actually a whole lot easier than going top free, because I'd like to do that too. I'd like to try going to a beach without the top, part. So you can just wear the bottom part of a bikini or something like that. I think that's a lot harder. It is for me anyway. Because at least if you go to a place like Bear Oaks, you're surrounded by people who are all kind of on the same page. So everybody's nude. Whereas if you're going to go to the beach, pretty much everybody is wearing a swimsuit. And then you're the person who's kind of like going against the grain, and it's kind of scary.
Sure. Well, that is a sort of social contract you're breaking, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's the reason nobody does it, even though they have the right to do it. And I suspect a lot more women feel that they might like to do it, but they don't want to become a spectacle. They don't want to be the ones that are judged or criticized or looked down upon. I mean, you can feel that way if you wear the wrong thing, right? If you wear the wrong outfit, if you're too casual at a dressy event, or even the other way around, you can feel really uncomfortable. So having your breasts exposed in society, that's even further out. So I understand why it's uncomfortable. And unfortunately, that's the problem. It'll never change.
Hmm.
It'll never change unless a whole bunch of people, one or two people doing it once in a while is not going to change that social contract that we have that causes people to double take, even if they say nothing.
Hmm.
Um, you know, we were, I've been with women who have gone top free in public, including you, Nikki, and generally people don't say anything,
Yeah.
but they're still looking at you. You get double takes, and you're certainly getting attention, and that can be uncomfortable. You have to be particularly determined to do that. It's not relaxing, right?
No, it's not. I've never done it by myself before. I always have some people around. I've done it with some girlfriends before, and yourself, and I've done it with Gerald. And it's very uncomfortable, but I always just continue conversation and try to avoid eye contact with anybody and just walk and just pretend that nobody's paying attention. And it's hard because I'm trying to do it. My hope is when I do it on a beach, that there might be other women that would like to be top free as well, and they're just looking around for one other person, even one other person to do, be an example, and then they would too, to kind of give the permission. It's certainly not that I am an exhibitionist, because I'm definitely not. I don't like when people are looking at me, so trying to be brave. But it's been a little while, and I realize it's because when I was in my early 20s, it wasn't so much a matter of personality, I don't think. Well, I mean, personality a little bit, but I was more likely to wear a bikini in my early 20s, so it was easier to take my top off, whereas now I'm more of a one-piece suit person at a beach, and now it feels weird just to roll it down because that just looks weird.
Well,
Did
even
any,
when
sorry.
you and I did the World Naked Bike Ride together,
Mhm.
it was an interesting experience. Um, there was something about there was a protest for um, against oil and in favor of people riding their bikes. That's primarily what it was. But to me, it was also a protest against the society forcing us to not be ourselves and have to hide behind clothes. But I haven't done it since because I felt mostly like I was on show and I wasn't the objective. I don't think anybody really got the message. And
Mm,
so I understand, it's hard to make the point. It's hard to be that person, even if you're doing it for others. It's not relaxing at all.
mm. And to come back to that question of what will people think? I think it's a big one for anybody who's interested in trying to get into naturism, or if they are already involved in naturism, but we know so many people that are kind of closet naturists that there's, family and friends and everybody don't know. Um, what do you say to that, Stefan?
What will people think if you're a naturist?
Yeah, if they
Yeah,
know.
well, I wasn't sure we were talking about just the top three part. Um, the Well, my advice is always to either completely hide it or to be totally open about it.
Mm,
The in between is difficult because if you hide it a little bit and then people find out, it seems like you must be hiding there must be something wrong because you're hiding. I've always taken the position to be completely open about it. I mean, I don't walk around announcing it. I guess in some ways I do a lot of media interviews, but generally speaking, that's not the objective. Uh, if you're open about it and you talk about it and you explain it, yes, there's always misconceptions. But
mm,
I think I've been, women will be seen as promiscuous and men will be seen as perverts, is kind of the assumption. And some of that may be true, but if you have a chance to explain it because you talk about it, then they will understand it as different. And it's a fairly easy one to accept. I think most people have heard of naturists and nudists and understand a little bit that it's about acceptance, um, even if they don't really believe it because they can't imagine how a whole bunch of people naked together is not a big orgy. And they have trouble
mhm,
imagining that. And I've had that conversation so many times where people are surprised when they get there and it's not even for them because they totally expected it. And I always say something like, but I told you that. And they said, I know, but I didn't believe you. I didn't believe it would be true for me.
yeah.
So that's I've never had a negative reaction. I don't know if you had. I've always, I was I had young children, and everybody knew I was a naturist because I was in the newspaper, and I was school council chair, and I was a scout leader, and nobody ever had any concerns. So it hasn't been a problem. If anybody thinks negatively, they've never said it to my face. So have you? Have you had problems?
Um, I don't think so. I mean, when I came out in the Toronto Star, it wasn't so much, I mean, then I was let go from my job. So that was something. And I know I had some family members that were a little disgruntled because I had my last name in it. Um, but it wasn't so much that it about me being a naturist so much as everybody was just worried about stuff. Um,
And it's
yeah,
not like your employer had a problem with it themselves, right?
yeah, actually, the CEO of the company came and visited me when the article came out and said that she's been a naturist herself and she understands completely what it's about, but it's a matter that it was in the Toronto Star on the front page of the living section, and this so many parents could have seen it, and it was just an image thing that they didn't. It was a before and after school program that I was in, and working with kids and you know
But you see, it's this problem we always have is the problem we have is the invisible people who are not complaining but might. And that's a very difficult one because they say it's not me, but it's my clients, constituents, voters, whatever it is, that I'm concerned about how it's going to look and how they're going to react. I'm convinced most people don't care. I don't think any of the parents would have cared. I know teachers who are open about it. I know daycare workers who are open about it, and it hasn't affected them because their employer hasn't chosen to be concerned. And yours was not concerned for themselves, as you said. They were concerned of what might happen.
Mhm.
Unless do you know that any parents complained? Do you know what any parents said? You got to get rid of that woman. I don't want her anywhere near my children.
No, I only actually spoke with one parent as I was greeting all of the kids and parents in the morning that it came out. I hadn't seen the paper yet. But one mom said, "Oh, we saw you this morning. Great photo. Good for you." That's the only parent that I heard anything from. So
Hmm. All for just being in your natural state. Somewhere
yeah,
else. Not at you weren't doing it at the daycare, were you?
no, definitely not. But I mean, that whole question of what will people think, that definitely has been a roller coaster for me over the years. So what was I? I was 22 when I first got started at Bear Oaks, and now I'm 38. And so that came out, I got fired from my job. I moved up to Bear Oaks, lived in a tent for the summer, and I was just all in. And I mean, you say that you don't go around telling everybody. I was. Every bus that I rode on, like whoever would listen, I'm just going on and talking about naturism. And I think that actually I felt really lucky to be a woman in a sense, because I do feel that men get kind of targeted as being perverts, where as a woman talking about being like socially nude and I'm not coming across as being promiscuous in a sense, that they're just like this is interesting, I'm just kind of leaning in and asking questions kind of thing. So went that first year just like all in, talking about it all the time, and then have been a little roller coaster. And I know that you know that, because I've had moments that I feel like I have a good idea and I want to go in on something, like when about doing nude yoga, and you're like, you should make that your niche, because there's so many yoga instructors out there, and you need to be able to stand out in some way, and you should niche into being a nude yoga instructor. And I was like, oh, I can't do that, I can't do that, people know me and that kind of thing. So then I lean into it. Now I feel like I'm leaning into it in a big way. And strangely, moving to the city is what did that for me. All of a sudden, I feel like I'm surrounded by all different kinds of people, and I don't care anymore. But when I was living Newmarket, even though Newmarket's not that small, it felt smaller town, and people, I just knew more people, and I was like, I don't know. So there's been a bit of that for me over the years for sure. Moving off of that though, Stefan, I wonder if you could tell us about your journey, what led you to naturism, and now you own a park and are on several boards and the president and that kind of thing. So if you could give us a little snapshot of that journey.
Yeah. Um, I can make it a long story or a short story. I'll make it a fairly short story.
Oh gosh,
For
it's already
me,
8:53. Where did that time go?
I know, but we started at 8:30,
Oh,
so
8:30. Right. Sorry. I was thinking it was 8 and I'm like, oh, it's
um,
an hour.
so for me, it started when I was in my late teens, and early 20s. We would go camping and skinny dipping often. That was part of that at night. Um, I enjoyed it a lot, and that made me want to kind of initiate it often, which so people I think started joking I was a nudist and things. And I think at one point I thought maybe I am. I mean, again, everybody's heard of nudists one way or the other, even if they don't understand what it's about. So I looked into it, and it was difficult because this was in the 80s and there was no internet. So research was libraries, yellow pages, nothing in yellow pages, very little in the libraries. But I did find magazines, which were a little uncomfortable to get because even though they were naturist or nudist magazines, they were in the adult section because, of course, they were full of naked people. So that has to be with the porn.
Mm.
And that led me to learn more about it. And eventually, I did find out of a club called Glen Echo. And I had read enough to know that single men, were not generally welcome in most places. So I went with a friend of mine, Erica, and who was surprisingly open to the idea. We weren't dating; we were just friends. So I was fully expected to be rejected, but she was totally like, "Yeah, sure, let's do it." And so I was, how old would I have been? 22, 23. And we went up there, and I really enjoyed it. And I thought it was difficult. It was very difficult for me because I had a lot of body shame. I grew up, even though it was a time in the 80s where men generally didn't have body shame. We could look like whatever, and nobody cared. We weren't supposed to have an idea, but still, in high school, the jocks, the football players were clearly the standards that everybody went for. And I was built more like a marathon runner. And not that I did that, probably should have, but I didn't. So I felt too skinny, and I wasn't muscular, and I was very uncomfortable. So I had body shame. I skipped gym so I wouldn't have to change in front of the other kids, because back then you did, and there was no stalls, and you took showers together. That's boys anyway. So it was hard, but as a result, it really was liberating. And because of that, I guess I overcompensated and went really full tilt. And part of it is my personality, that it was just about being naked, really, and just being comfortable. And it made me go, why? Why is this such a big deal? Why is it so hard? Why is it such a taboo in society? And these questions kept kind of gnawing at me, and I started looking and thinking about it and reading more about it. And that really took me down to naturism as a, a movement and a philosophy, not just something that people do when they're naked.
Awesome.
So,
And then how did you know that you wanted to own a place? Was that always the dream, or was it just because an opportunity
no,
presented itself?
no, not that either. Um, Sometimes part of my personality is I don't want to do things, but if nobody else is doing it, I feel the need to step in and do it. Um, I was uh, I was unfortunate enough that my first wife passed away when I was 28 years old, and it's quite unusual to lose your spouse that early. And I had been a member of the Federation of Canadian Naturists in order to find out where to go, because back then, again, without internet, it was hard to find places. So I joined the FCN to get the magazine and to get the reviews about places. Um, and then I found I worked in advertising. I worked for advertising agencies, and I found their marketing to be just terrible. So when Barb passed away, I decided to volunteer for the FCN, and that led me down the path of learning that a lot of clubs were not growing anymore. But I could see why, because of they weren't marketing themselves properly, they weren't keeping up with the times. And when I remarried and had children, and we were raising our children as naturists, we saw that the club, which we loved, was going to the owners were in their 80s, and it was going to close or sell or something. Something had to happen, because you don't run a place by yourselves forever when you become elderly. So we ended up making an offer to buy the club, which was accepted. They backed out. That to make too logic of a complicated story, but they backed out even though they signed a contract. And so when I started fighting them in court, they kicked me out because they didn't like me anymore because I was fighting in court. And so I joined another club, which is the one that I end up buying, which is now called Bear Oaks. So I did it out of necessity because I thought somebody should do it and show that you can run a club that is successful, and that you don't also have to compromise on your values, because it was a time, and it still is today, but particularly in the 90s, was a time in the early 2000s where people said, if you want to survive, you got to compromise your values and not be so strong about the philosophy, and just let people keep their clothes on if they want to. But I could see that wasn't working, and I wanted to show that you could do it, and that be more successful if you were true to what it was about. because people, I think, forgot why people went into naturism and were interested in naturism. It wasn't that they wanted to run around naked. That was not the primary motive. It was the ideology, the philosophy, a different way of interacting with each other and living our lives, that taking off your clothes was just a tool to get there. It was not the objective. And I think a lot of clubs back then forgot it and still do today. And I think that's the biggest flaw.
Yeah. I mean, what you say about your personality and then, doing it out of necessity, you really do that. With, I know, taking on, now that you're president of the INF, International Federation of Naturists as well. And I know that you do different things like that in your community all the time, like, nobody else is doing it, I guess I need to. So, I mean, I celebrate you for that. That's amazing.
Thank you.
And I know that when I was young and first started working at Bare Oaks, that I was new to everything, and most of what I was learning was coming from you. Yet there were other people as well, different voices, and we were meeting people from different clubs and that kind of thing. And I suppose I would say I was impressionable. And when somebody would come and they have a clothing optional club, and they were saying like why that's better than it is at Bare Oaks, where it's full of naturism and that kind of thing, I was like, maybe, and that kind of thing. But I have to say, I mean, it's taken off so much that I feel like maybe besides the money spent on putting up the internet tower thing, do you think your other major expense has been on building parking lots because so many people are coming?
Well, that's certainly, that was a lot more money than the parking lot was a lot more money than that internet tower, actually.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So, that's one of my biggest expenses to date has been building a large parking lot so we'd have room for cars. It makes me a little sad because I'm a big believer in transport, public transport, and but it's just not impossible when you're way out in the countryside. You've got to get a car to get there. So we needed that parking lot because we were overwhelmed with cars.
Yeah,
And I'll say,
especially
by
when
the
you
way,
go. Sorry, go ahead.
no, it's okay. I was just going to say, I used to believe in clothing optional too early on. I used to think, live and let live, and what if you're comfortable with me being me, then I should be comfortable with you being you. Um, but it just the problem is we in an ideal world it shouldn't matter, but we don't live in an ideal world. We live in a world which is very damaged, where society has forced an incredible phobia about the body on everybody. And so and plus on top of that, you also get this hypersexualization and objectification that comes with it. And so when you make it clothing optional, you break that equality, you break that community, that changes the way people interact with each other and look at themselves. You just get people come in to look, you get people come in to still be objectifiers and sexualize you as a person. I'm not saying it doesn't even happen at all at Bare Oaks, it does too, but it's much harder for those people. They are much fewer, and somehow they're more noticeable, so we can either try to convince them to be otherwise or tell them that they're in the wrong place. And
Well, I always loved answering that question on the phone when I worked in the office, and people would say, well, can't I just come and still have, wear my clothes because I'm a little bit nervous. I would always say that you can wear your clothes everywhere else, and this is a place you can come to see what it's like to take them off. And would say, it's the same rule for everybody else. And if you're nervous and you're new and you're trying it, I'm sure you wouldn't want somebody that's with their clothes on watching you for some reason. So it's the great equalizer.
Yeah, and it makes it more comfortable. The fact that nobody's wearing clothes is what makes it easier for everybody to take their clothes off. I've heard so many times how uncomfortable everyone was. They weren't sure they were going to take their clothes off, and they get there and they see nobody wearing clothes, and it makes them want to take their clothes off as fast as they can
because then you're the weird one.
You're the weird and odd one. Yeah. So it's a community, and you kind of have to play the game. And having said that, we don't force anybody to like take everything off the moment they pass the gate or anything like that. That's entirely up to them. They can take their time.
Mhm.
We don't yell at anybody and tell them, "Hey, take your clothes off." That doesn't happen. At least I don't. Do you do that?
No. No, I don't.
What you doing? You're
Oh,
looking at
sorry,
something?
I was reading somebody's comment, and I will get to
Oh,
those.
okay.
I'll get to those in a second. Um, well, thank you. Thank you so much for sharing your story there. Mine was that I'd been, I didn't really know what I was doing. I was in my early 20s, that transitional time where you just do some jobs. And my mom actually had started attending Bear Oaks, and Stefan had just taken over. And she said, you know, they're looking for people that, you know, summer staff. And I thought, well, I could do this job that I always do, and I could work at a summer camp for kids, and it'll be very like, it'll be the thing that I always do. Or I could do something completely different and work with naked people. And I choose different. And I remember I was really nervous about figuring out what I was going to wear to the interview. And that was something that was discussed in the, the Toronto Star article, because I didn't know if we were going to be wearing something or not. And I put a lot of effort into figuring out if I need to take this off. I don't want it to show lines on my body. Like, you know, if you know, maybe wear jeans or something, it might make lines on your body. I thought that would make me look like such a noob. And I didn't want to look like a noob and have lines on my body. Anyway, in the end, it didn't matter at all. But it was like gospel to me when I first started, as I say, like telling everybody about it. And it's definitely held a place in my heart always, always. And interestingly, I used to live 15 minutes from it. And when I was just started teaching yoga there and was no longer working in the office and that kind of thing, wouldn't go as frequently. And anytime I was there, people were always like, how come you're not here very often? And now that I've moved down to the city, and now it's closer to a 45-minute drive, I find myself, I call it my community all the time. And it is. And I think that it's become that much more precious to me since moving, because I moved down here and I didn't know anyone. And little fish, big pond kind of thing. And I found myself just running back to my community. What was familiar, it's like Cheers, where everybody knows your name, and just want to be there all the time. And so this body acceptance mentor thing, kind of a new hat. Stefan and I had talked about putting together something, put together like a 6-week body acceptance workshop that I couldn't get off the ground when I lived in Newmarket. I tried running it 3 times. Largely, that's just me and my lack of skills of marketing. But I've gotten better at it since I moved to the city. And I was invited to go and speak at a church about body acceptance, not something that I organized myself. Somebody reached out to me out of the blue, and I'd never done something like that before. And I was super scared, but I did it anyway. And it was really well accepted. One person got up in the middle of it and said, "This is disgusting," and stormed out. And I was like, oh no. And I wasn't sure if everybody was feeling the same way and they were just being polite or whatever, but I gave it a second, and then I just kept talking and everybody else stayed. So I was like, fingers crossed, it's going okay. Um, and after the service, everybody came up to me and they said, "Oh, I'm so sorry about her. She does that sometimes." I'm like, oh, okay. And at that church, they have a discussion afterwards. And apparently it was one of the better attended discussion groups that they've ever had. And everybody was sharing these really like personal, vulnerable stories about themselves and their journeys with body acceptance. And it was so incredibly beautiful that we'd created that safe space for them to do that. And people were saying, please keep doing this work, which is not something I necessarily thought of myself as doing as work. I was just thinking of this as a one-off. Somebody's invited me to speak. And so So I just decided to lean into it this year, and I don't know what it looks like. It's been a little bit hard for me to define what is a body acceptance mentor. I guess I'm a person who I'm trying to lead by example, and I certainly am on a journey, as I feel everybody is. I mean, I don't know many people who just always feel amazing about their bodies all of the time. And so when I have my moments of feeling vulnerable or the little mind demon or something like that going on, I write about it, post about it, whatnot, in hopes that I'm that people can relate and they see that I'm a safe space. I'm a person that I don't tend to wear makeup or put a whole lot into my appearance. I'm not a slob or anything, but not that there's anything wrong with that. But yeah, I just feel like that could be this could be kind of a good thing to have out there as well on social media. Because speaking with some authority and some confidence, because that's not the norm. So it could be nice just to see
No,
an average girl.
it's not normal at all.
Yeah.
It's and that's what's it's still astounding. You know, I was part of that too as growing up, as I said. And the fact somebody stormed out of your session is amazing to me because first of all, I'm sure it was announced ahead of time, so they knew what the topic was. But let's say they didn't understand. She didn't have to take her clothes off. You weren't taking your clothes off. You were talking about an idea, right? And so the fact that that idea can be so disturbing to people, we're talking about our natural self. Like somehow we have managed in our society to convince ourselves, and everybody accepts this blindly as gospel, pardon the pun, because we're talking to church, that we should be ashamed and embarrassed and even offended by our own image.
Mm.
And it's so people just think that's the way it is. It's the way we're born and the way we are, but it's not true. If anybody who's had young children knows they are completely comfortable running around naked until we shame them into it. It doesn't take very long because we're very good at shaming them into it. But at birth, it's not an issue. It's not, we're not born that way. And the fact that you have to even explain that and argue it means that people haven't thought it through. They haven't really considered it. The fact that I have to explain and I have to provide scientific evidence that it's good for children to grow up in naturism is amazing to me. That the default should be, you have to prove to me it's bad, not the other way around, because that's the way we are. This is our natural state. And the fact that we think we should all look identical with our bodies is also screwed up. And that's the beautiful thing is, to me, naturism, and my children grew up seeing thousands of people and probably never saw two bodies that look the same. Everybody's unique. And if we could all experience that, I think that's why it's so important to me, because I think the world would be a much better place and people would be much happier. There'd be less depression. I think it would solve a lot of issues. People think this what we do is just silliness. We just run around naked and prance around. Yee! Isn't that funny?
There's very little
No,
prancing happening there, really.
very little prancing. Yes. Yeah. So it's just So what I think you're doing is you're healing people. And the problem is most people don't even know they are sick. They don't even know they've been messed up by the world, and that this is even a solution. It's so outrageous and extreme that people cannot get around in their head that this may actually make them feel better. So good for you.
Thank you.
How many can you heal?
I don't know. There's a bunch of people here that in the chat, and I feel badly about ignoring them. So let's bring that up here. Leah recently put here, are there plus size nudist public figures? As a larger woman, I find it challenging to see myself and where I belong in nudism and nudist spaces sometimes. Well, you did a video recently, Stefan, right?
I've done a lot of videos. Which one are you talking about?
It was a YouTube video, and I remember there were comments about, I think it was even about kids in naturism.
Yeah, well, the kids with naturism, there's a couple of women who are, one for sure is a plus size.
Hmm.
And as you know, even plus size, that's like one size it's not. You've told me you think you're a plus size. People sometimes, right?
Yeah, well, certainly clothing wise, I'm usually at least a large. And
Yeah. Well,
sometimes they don't even fit in that. So, mm,
so sometimes there's all types of bodies, and I don't think you should. I don't know the person asking a comment why they think they're a plus size. There may or may not be as plus as they think they are, because that's a very common thing with the body dysmorphia that the society has, that we all see ourselves as worse than we really are. But yes, there's every size at Bare Oaks for sure,
mhm,
um, as there is every age, and it's just who you are. I
yeah,
mean, if people are severely overweight, that's a health issues that they should look into. Um, but it doesn't matter to us. If they're nice people, we like them.
yeah,
We like talking to them.
absolutely. And it's true that absolutely every different, shape, size, ethnicity, age, definitely will see it, see everybody there. And that is what's nice. Mm. Yay! Nature Room has been a reboot in their life, says John. That's excellent. It's amazing people, and saying the same thing with different shapes and sizes and that kind of thing. Oh, 5-year anniversary. Does Bear Oaks offer a shuttle from the airport? I'm gonna say maybe. I know there's somebody who does do that kind of thing. That I don't know if she's
So,
connected
well,
to the office.
Bare Oaks does not,
No,
because
Bear Oaks
I
doesn't.
looked into it. I was looking not just from the airport. I was looking at having a shuttle service every weekend that would go from Toronto, so people wouldn't have to find a car. It's really expensive. The driver needs a special license. The insurance is expensive. Plus, you have vehicle maintenance and everything else. It was going to become not cost effective. Either it was going to cost us a lot of money to run it, and we'd lose a lot of money as a result, or we would have to charge such a high price that I wasn't sure anybody would ever take it. But as Nikki says, there is a person at Bare Oaks who is not affiliated with us, because I can't, as a business, be involved in that, who will give people rides for a little bit of money, gas money and stuff. And
Hmm.
we're happy to give away their number to anybody who inquires of the office.
Hmm. Um, I wanted to chat about terms, just really quick. So this all started because I was looking up, what happens if I put into Google, what's the difference between body neutrality and body positivity? So body neutrality is meant to have no emotion about your body whatsoever. It's I have a body, end of story kind of thing. Um, Taking the work out of it, see you later, nothing happening else in the mind. And there's a body positivity. There's certainly been a big movement around that. And there's been discussion about there being that toxic positivity. So I think that was kind of a bit of the discussion there, that to be like, all of this about self-love, when maybe there's a deeper conversation really happening on the inside. I kind of liked both of them when I was reading about it, because in a sense, I do feel that way. I feel like in a sense, it's almost how I lead as a body acceptance mentor, that I have a body, and it moves me from point A to point B, and sometimes with strength and grace. And I appreciate that my head gets to live on top of the body, and I get to travel and experience things and taste delicious stuff and whatever. And I don't, and I guess I feel that have that mentality when, you know, when a t-shirt clings to the stomach in a certain way, that I'm like, yeah. Like, it doesn't matter. I'm a lovely person. Let's go out into the world. Kind of like, okay, I see that I feel that way, and moving on kind of thing. Whereas the other part that's, I I am a person and I have a body and I deserve to feel loved no matter what the shape and size and that kind of thing is also true. Sometimes it just feels a little maybe harder to get around some days. So over to you, Stefan.
Well, I'm going to, yeah, there's all these terms, and the problem is there's different definitions of it. And a lot of body positivity lean towards something which is not fixing the problem, which is like, I am round and I'm hot and I'm, wait a second, your body's for you. Your body is who you are. It shouldn't be about whether you're hot to others or you look good to others. That's what we want to lean towards. You should love your body because it's an amazing, it's you. It's an amazing machine. Like it does, you live for close to 100 years with this thing, and it keeps you upright. It allows you to survive in the world and move around. I mean, I could go on about the amazing machine that our body is, right? Just if you look at our immune system and how it fights things and learns to fight disease and things like that. Doesn't always work, unfortunately, we know. But generally speaking, it's an amazing system. So we should be happy with with this thing of ours, this body of ours, but not necessarily go, and I think I look really good for others. You know, you've grown up basically since you were in your early 20s with the ideas of naturism.
Mm.
And still, I know you talk about how sometimes you feel, oh, I don't look like I did when I was that age anymore, and you don't feel as happy with who you are. And yet you're a much more interesting person. You've learned more and you know more and you're doing more. You're married. I am sure that nobody's ever looked at you and said, oh, I'm not talking to her because of her body. And you know that.
Mm.
But society, all those messages that keep coming at you still get there. And occasionally you feel that insecurity.
Mm.
So getting rid of that, is that neutrality? Is that positivity? I don't know. It's probably kind of a combination of both. But let's face it, to be perfectly neutral is probably impossible as long as we live in this world that we are in, right?
And I do feel, I think that sometimes that, if maybe somebody wouldn't like me for some reason because of the way I look, and then I'm like, well, I don't want to talk to them anyway.
Yes.
If that's how they feel, well, screw them.
Well, if they're quick to judge you that way, I don't think they're really interested in you anyway.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Not as a person anyway.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, somebody's saying when they go to Solaire, they enjoy talking to people who are 10 plus years older and whatnot, younger. Oh, good. Yeah. I appreciate my time at Bear Oaks, especially working in the bistro as a server, because especially during the week, there's more retired folk who are there, which makes sense because they're not working.
Yes.
And I've heard from so many people looking back on their lives, and they say, like, do it now, whatever whatever you want to do it now. And I've taken that on, and that's why I love to travel and that kind of thing, and why I prioritize my money the way that I do, because I've heard so many stories about, we just kept thinking, we're eventually, when we retire, we're going to take the kids here and we're going to do that trip there and that kind of thing. But then sometime by the time they retire, especially if they haven't taken a vacation, haven't done anything for themselves all that time, it's just work, 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 then, the body's maybe not in great shape anymore, and it's harder to enjoy. So that's a huge life lesson I've learned from chatting with some people at Bear Oaks.
Yeah.
You never know who you're going
And
to find.
no, and there's always that question is, are there young people there? Are there older people there? What's the demographics? And I can't even tell you because we don't ask age, we don't track age, and I can't tell you that. But I can tell you, like you said, if you come on Wednesday, it's probably going to be older people. Younger people have jobs or things to do, and so no, they're not retired. They're not going to be there all the time. And older people that are retired come far more often. you know some of them that come or used to come, and some still do every single day all year round almost.
Yeah.
So because that's their place to be in their community where they hang out. But you know, when I started in naturism, I was that young person. I was the same age you were, and I don't ever remember thinking, "Oh, I just wish there was more people my age." I just met people that were interested and we chatted. Now, I was never a young person who wanted to party all the time, so maybe that's part of the difference, I guess.
Mm.
Um, but even at that, there were places we visited that they had lots of parties. I don't know. I don't know why sometimes there's this obsession with being afraid that there's too many older people. Like, they're not zombies; they're not going to eat your brains.
I
And
wonder if
yeah,
it's
we
a
have.
matter of feeling on display. I've
Well,
had somebody
yeah.
who was younger, somebody who was about 20 and in very good shape and was feeling a little self-conscious about some older people who were on recliners. I mean, like that's what they do. I mean, they're there sitting on recliners in the sunshine, whether they're there or not.
But were they looking at them? Do you think that's what was happening? I mean, like, there's looking. I mean, we all look at each other everywhere all the time.
Hmm.
That's normal. Younger, older. Some, if I'm sitting on a chair, somebody walks by, I don't care what they look like. I'm noticing them walking by. That's normal.
Hmm.
So sometimes those insecurities are not the reality, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Just like if you think there's something about you that bothers you, you think everybody notices. That's what everybody's looking at, or whatever it is. A stain on your shirt. Do you think that's anything anybody's looking at is a stain on your shirt?
Hmm.
So I'm not sure. I'm not sure how real. Did you feel that way when you were younger? Do you feel that way now?
No, no, I remember being in Cuba and there was a nude beach, but you had to walk along the beach to get there. And so I remember wearing a swimsuit as I walk there and just feeling like I was very conscious of my posture while I was walking and thinking about sucking in a certain way and whatnot as I'm walking past everybody. And then when I got past everybody and I knew I was in the naturist zone and I took it off, I just felt so comfortable. And then I didn't care about how I was holding my body anymore and I just relaxed. And that's how I am all the time when I'm at Barrows. So
Yeah, and when you started, it was almost all older people. There
mhm,
were no families and young people as there are now. So, and you still didn't feel that way. So, you know, it depends on how what you think people are thinking, and you don't know.
mhm, true. Yeah. I mean, I was suggesting to that person who was chatting with me about that, you know, that they were like, oh, maybe people are looking at me. And I was saying, you know, it might even be with nostalgia. You know, I
Yeah.
wouldn't say it, you know, salacious necessarily. It could just be like, I remember when I was that young, like those were good times kind of thing. My knees
Well,
didn't hurt so much.
it's just like I love watching, children playing. It's not because I have some weird thing that let's call the police. No, who doesn't enjoy watching children having fun and laughing and playing and
Yeah.
whatever? And there's a nostalgia there for sure that you wish your life was still that simple. And so, yeah,
Mm, yeah. We have a couple more minutes if anybody would like to ask any questions of either of us in any way. We could go at the color run when I started walking it. As in people were looking at you? I'm not sure exactly what they mean. I felt old, oh, when you started walking.
yes, yes, well, yes. When we start to do those exercises that we used to do more easily when we were younger, I certainly feel that.
Somebody's asking how you would react if we saw somebody that we know. That's a fairly common question, isn't it?
Yeah, it's always. I'm sorry, but it's always surprises me that it's a fear because they're there too. So they certainly wouldn't be upset that you saw them, and they would probably be very excited to see somebody that they know, assuming they like you or you like them. I mean, if you guys don't like each other, that's more complicated. complicated, but you don't have to hang out together anyway. But yes, I've met people who work together, who like I've seen people who've work together who bump into each other at Bear Oaks, and that's always even more interesting. But I think if I don't think anybody is out to out anyone if that's the fear, because they're there too and they understand. Um, so it's really nothing to be concerned about. I remember one time I was showing somebody around, and they saw somebody in the distance. They went, "Oh my God, they go to my church," and because it was the church and everything else. And again, I have to say, but they're here too, so it's okay. They understand. And they went, "Oh, right, right." I mean, this fear is so ingrained that people don't think it through, and it's fine. I don't know that anybody's ever had a problem meeting somebody that they know. Now, it's always been, I think, generally a positive experience.
I will say that when I go to the park with somebody that I've never been there with before, I'm taking a friend for the first time, which has happened many, many times since I started going there. There's that moment if we've only known each other in like in the textile world, and we're at the car and we're gonna take it off. I feel there's that moment of touch of awkwardness, and what I usually say is like, let's do a quick up and down. Because I just look a person up and down. It's like, okay, there we go. We got it over with. Look at that. We both
Yeah.
have bodies.
But you're
Moving on
also
with our
doing
day.
the part that's hardest. You're undressing.
Yeah.
Being nude, being dressed is much easier than undressing. The undressing is, I think, fraught with all kinds of cultural
Yeah.
imagery that means a whole bunch of different things to different people. And so that's the hard part, is undressing often, which is why we often say, well, if you want, you can go into that room and undress and then come out and then it's fine. Or dressing, even dressing. People have a hard time dressing at their car. Because the first thing you put on is your underwear and your bra, so you're standing there in your underwear and your bra, and
It's so awkward.
in public. And naked was okay, but in your bra, that seems weird. Oh, did I pick good ones? Did they match today? Are they clashing?
See, I usually just wear a dress and I just don't put anything on underneath, and so it's just really quick on and off. And I do that for
I
that
so
reason.
envy
I
that.
hate
I so
undressing.
envy that. It's so much easier than what I have to deal with.
Yeah, I'm sure. Pants and shoes and everything. Blah.
I know. Ugh.
Well, and I've said to so many people when I used to work there in the office, and they've done the sign-in process, and now it's just time to like enjoy themselves. And they say, like, any suggestions? And I said, well, maybe, you want, you can use the bathroom there and take a minute to yourself. But you could do it slowly, as you say, like, you're never like, take it off right away kind of thing. But I suggest do it like a Band-Aid, just rip it off. Because you have that moment when you step out, and it's the first time, this is with social nudity, and you're going, oh my God, you're just like, you're thinking everybody's going to look at you. It's like a dream sequence. Everybody's going to look and they're going to go, ah, or something like that. But then it doesn't happen. You just stand there for a second and you wait for it. And then the world, it was just continues this exactly the way that it was. And you're like, oh, huh. And then you just have a nice day.
Well, but I remember my very first time. When you're skinny dipping, usually it's quickly take everything off and diving in the water. It's in the dark, whatever. And the very first time we were sitting on the lawn for my very first visit with my friend. And so, okay, we took our clothes off sitting there, but I remember standing up. I don't think I had ever felt the wind blowing on my entire body, at least not since I was a child, and I don't remember it. And I remember that was just absolutely, well, it was kind of amazing, but also very disconcerting in a lot of ways. It took a minute to just kind of going, whoa, and but yeah, it's an amazing feeling. It's an amazing feeling once you feel that liberation. But it's astounding that I would have gone to my, I don't know, whenever I was 22, 23 years old, and I've never really felt that on my body.
Yeah.
The sun and the air. Seems basic.
Question, as a park owner, do you think resorts would be better off in America if they are for profit like how they are in France, considering all the closings?
That's well, that's an interesting question. Yes and no. How's that? Um, for profit, for profit, if it was, obviously our theoretically Barracks is for profit. I've not taken any profit out of it for 17 years that we've owned it, but it is a private business, and the power of that is I can make decisions quickly, and I'm very consistent because I have a very focused vision, and I don't have to spend a lot of time rationalizing or explaining it to anybody. I just do it, and people don't always agree, and that's okay. But it's not a democracy, and it happens, and I make it work, and that's the advantage. The problem with nonprofits, uh, which can be a lot more pure in their vision if they understand what they're doing, and it's a lot more egalitarian in terms of everybody gets a say, which is a nice thing for everybody to feel they're part of something. It's hard to make a decision. It's hard to take big decisions. And I see a lot of nonprofit clubs that have trouble growing. There's a few things that happen. One, to grow, you have to invest. You can't just, you build something 30, 40 years ago, it needs to be renovated. It needs to be redone. It needs to be rebuilt. And if you're going to grow, you have to invest large amounts of money, sometimes take on debt. And that's uncomfortable for committees. Committees have a hard time making those drastic decisions. Also, the other thing that happens that I see nonprofit clubs is everybody who's there has their spot. So they don't care. They're not looking, they're not interested in growing and developing and attracting new people, because it's true. Attracting new people attracts problems. I cannot argue that. Every year we have people who come to Barracks that are a problem. And if we didn't let anybody in, those people would never come. But of course, people would get older, then you would not have new people to take over. And by the time you notice, it would be too late. So that's the problem with the nonprofits. So combination of the two is good. I think in large resorts like you have in France, it almost has to be for profit because it'd be impossible to make decisions. Hey, kitty. But in the problem in France that I see in some large resorts is they're being run by people who don't understand the movement. And even naturists and nudists don't always understand the movement. My analogy is always, if Starbucks, like love it or hate it, did not succeed because they decided to charge a lot of money for coffee. It wasn't about money first. It was about the coffee and the experience and the environment they were selling it. And even for profit, you have to understand your business. And if you do your business well and everybody is attracted to your business, then they will be willing to pay a lot of money. And that's what happens at Starbucks. People don't go to Starbucks because they want to spend too much money on a cup of coffee. They get something out of it. Otherwise, they wouldn't bother. And that's the focus. So what is the business of naturism is about experience. And you have to understand that experience. And that's what is often missing in the commercial resorts.
Thank you for that answer.
I think
I
that's
learned
clear.
stuff. Well, it's a little bit after 9:30, so I'd like to wrap up. Thank you so much for coming out, Stefan. I appreciate it. He just got off an airplane, which is fairly usual for him, and had a busy day today. So thank you so much.
My pleasure. And I'm getting on an airplane in another 3 days. I was saying that this month is just going to be about a changing time zone. I spent a week getting used to the West Coast time zone. Now I'm back here for a week to get used to the Eastern time zone. And in a few days, I'm going to get used to the European time zone for a week. And then I'll come back here and get used to the Eastern time zone again.
Well, thank
Anyway,
you
it's been a
very much.
pleasure.
Yeah.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm always happy to talk about my favorite subject.
Yeah. And thanks everybody for being here, being a part of it and sharing, and have a wonderful rest of your evening. Take care.